Leo Vance stared at the deed in his weathered hands, then at the vineyard that was supposed to be his sanctuary. 100 acres, sold to him for the impossible sum of $1. The weathered redwood fence posts stretched endlessly under the harsh Californian sun, and the main house, a 2-story stone structure, sat like a forgotten prayer in the distance. When he pushed open the creaking front door 3 hours later, a fine layer of dust settling on his worn boots, he discovered the deal came with something the seller had conveniently forgotten to mention. Someone was already living there. The sound hit him first. Soft footsteps from the floor above, deliberate and careful, the movements of someone trying not to be heard. Leo froze in the doorway, his hand still gripping the cold brass handle. The house was supposed to be empty. Boone Carter, the slick land agent in Sacramento, had sworn on it when they shook hands at the land office. Nobody's set foot on that place in years, Vance, the man had said, his eyes darting away just a little too quickly. You'll have it all to yourself. A fresh start. Yet there she was. A young woman appeared at the top of the wide wooden staircase, her dark hair falling loose around her shoulders, wearing a simple, patched but clean calico dress. She held an old, unlit lantern in one hand. She didn't scream or run. Instead, she looked down at him with the strangest expression, not fear, but something closer to a weary resignation, as if she'd been expecting this moment for a very long time. You must be the new owner, she said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. I'm Isabella. I've been taking care of this place. Leo's mind, usually so calm and ordered from his years as a Texas Ranger, raced. Taking care of it? For who? And why in God's name hadn't Carter mentioned her? He studied her face, searching for the telltale signs of deception, but found only a quiet, unyielding strength that reminded him painfully of his late wife during the hardest times of the Comanche raids. The seller didn't say anything about anyone living here, he managed, his voice a low, gravelly sound from disuse. Isabella descended the last few steps slowly, each movement measured and graceful. Boone Carter doesn't know everything about this vineyard, she replied, her voice soft but firm. There are things about this land that go deeper than what's written on any deed. She moved to the large, dust-caked window and pulled back a faded curtain, revealing the vast expanse of sun-scorched, rolling hills beyond. I've been here for 3 years, with my cousins. This place saved our lives when we had nowhere else to go. We've kept the roof patched, the well clean, and the last of the old vines watered. I suppose you could say we've been taking care of each other. Leo felt the carefully planned future he had envisioned shifting beneath his feet. He'd hoarded every penny for 5 long years to buy his own land, to build something that belonged only to him, a place where he could be alone with his ghosts. This vineyard, even abandoned and run down, represented everything he'd dreamed of, a quiet end. But now, standing in this dusty room with this unexpected, determined woman, he realized his $1 purchase had brought him something far more complicated than property. Why did Carter sell it so cheap? He asked, though he had a sinking feeling the answer would change everything. Isabella turned from the window, and for the first time since he had arrived, he saw a flicker of genuine fear cross her features. Because, she said quietly, he's not the only one who knows we're here, and the others, they're not coming to make deals. Leo set his worn leather satchel on the dusty wooden table, the sound echoing in the silent house. His mind was a whirlwind of questions. Behind Isabella, 2 other young women appeared from a back room, one with fiery red hair and a sharp, assessing gaze, the other younger, with blonde hair and worried blue eyes. Her cousins. Who's coming for you? He asked, keeping his voice steady despite the growing tension. It was the voice he had used as a ranger, calm and authoritative. Isabella moved away from the window, her hands clasped tightly in front. Of her, men who believe we took something that belongs to them, she said. Something valuable enough that they've been trying to drive us off this land for 3 years. Did you take it? She met his eyes directly, and he saw no deception there, only a deep, weary pain. We took something, yes, she admitted, but it belonged to our family long before he ever laid a claim to it. Her voice carried a sorrow that spoke of old, unhealed wounds. Our grandfather's spring. He was a vintner, the first to grow grapes in this valley. He discovered a hidden year-round spring deep in the hills on this property. It's the only water source in this valley that has never run dry. Leo studied her face, recognizing the look of someone who had been pushed to their breaking point. He'd seen it in his own mirror after the raid that took his family. So you're protecting a spring, he stated. We're protecting our grandfather's legacy, she corrected him. And the only thing that's keeping Marcus Thorne from owning this entire valley. She spoke the name with a mixture of hatred and fear. Thorne has been buying up all the land, diverting the river, choking out the other homesteaders. Our grandfather refused to sell. He died a month later. A riding accident, they called it. Thorne showed up the next day with forged papers, saying our grandfather owed him everything. He took our home, our land, everything. So you took back what was yours, Leo concluded. The red-haired cousin Sophia stepped forward. We took the original deed to this land and our grandfather's. Private ledgers, she said, her voice sharp. Documents that prove his claim is legitimate and that detail every threat Thorne made against him. They would destroy Thorne's entire operation if they ever saw the inside of a courthouse. She gave a bitter, humorless laugh. But getting to a courthouse alive is the challenge. The sound of hoofbeats in the distance made them all freeze. The youngest cousin, Elena, rushed to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peer out. Leo joined her, and together they watched. 3 riders approaching along the main trail. Is that them? Leo whispered Dot. Isabella shook her head. No, Thorne's men ride with more arrogance. She paused, studying the riders. That's strange. They're moving too fast for casual travelers, but too slow for any real urgency. Like they're searching for something. Leo felt his stomach tighten. He'd bought this vineyard to escape complications. But watching those distant figures approach, he realized his $1 investment had pulled him into something far more dangerous than he had ever bargained for. We should go, Elena said suddenly, turning from the window, her voice trembling. They'll see the smoke from the chimney. Where would we go? Sophia countered. This is our home. She looked at Leo, her expression a challenge. And now, I suppose, it's yours too. The riders drew closer, and Leo could make out their faces now. They were hard men with weathered features that came from years of enforcing their own brand of justice. They reined in their horses about 50 yards from the house, close enough to be a threat but far enough for a parley. That's Finch, Isabella whispered, her voice tight with recognition. He works for Marcus Thorne. He's the one who... He was there the day my grandfather died. Leo watched as the 3 men spread out in a loose semicircle, their movements practiced and coordinated. These were not random drifters. They were hunters who had found their prey. What exactly is in those ledgers? He asked, needing to understand the stakes. Sophia, the sharp-eyed redhead, moved away from the window and knelt beside a loose floorboard near the fireplace. With quick, efficient movements, she pried it up and reached into the hidden space. When she stood, she held a leather pouch and a rolled bundle of papers. The deed to the last independent water source in this territory, she said, unrolling one of the documents, and the survey maps showing exactly where the underground spring runs deepest. Our grandfather spent 10 years mapping every fissure, every pocket of water in these hills. Thorne killed him for it, and discovered he'd hidden the real documents. Isaac studied the intricate drawings. This wasn't just a claim, it was a treasure map. This is worth a fortune. Enough to buy half the territory, Isabella confirmed. And enough to make them hunt us across 3 states. A sharp whistle from outside made them all turn. Finch had dismounted and was walking slowly toward the house, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. His companions remained mounted, their rifles held ready. "Miss Isabella," Finch called out, his voice carrying clearly. "We know you're in there. Mr. Thorne would like to have a word. Time to settle this like civilized people." Leo felt his ranger instincts surge. He looked at the 3 determined women. He had come here seeking an end, a quiet place to let his own story fade. But the world, it seemed, had other plans. "There's a back way out," Elena whispered. "Urgently. Through the cellar and down to the creek. You could slip away while they're focused on the front." "What about you?" he asked. Isabella smiled, a sad, weary expression. "We're tired of running. Maybe it's time we made our stand." Leo stared at her, recognizing the resignation in her voice. She was ready to sacrifice herself. But as Finch's footsteps approached the porch, echoing like a countdown, Leo made a decision that surprised even himself. "No," he said firmly, moving toward the front door. "This is my property now, and I don't recall inviting anyone onto it." He looked at the cousins, his eyes holding a resolve they hadn't seen there before. "You go hide those documents. Somewhere they'll never find them. I'll handle Mr. Finch." For a moment, they just stared at him. Then Isabella nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the alliance forming between them. As they disappeared back toward the cellar, Leo stepped out onto the front porch, the afternoon sun casting his long shadow across the weathered boards. He kept his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "This is private property," he called out. "You and your friends need to move along." Finch stopped at the base of the porch steps, looking up at the house with a cold smile that promised violence. "Well now," he said, his voice a low drawl. "Looks like the little ladies found themselves a protector." He took another step, closer, his spurs jangling. "Thing is, friend, we're not here for trouble with you. We just need to have a conversation with the Miss Callahans about some property that belongs to our employer." "I don't see any legal papers," Leo replied, his eyes noting how Finch's companions had positioned themselves. "As far as I know, anything on this vineyard belongs to me now." Finch chuckled, a sound like gravel in a tin cup. "Legal papers, that's funny." He gestured toward the house. "See, the way we figure it, those girls have been squatting here for years, probably going through anything of value left behind. We wouldn't be surprised if they found some items that need to be returned to their rightful owners." Inside the house, Leo could hear the faint sound of a floorboard creaking. The cousins were moving, hopefully securing the documents. He needed to buy them more time. But Finch was clearly growing impatient. "Tell you what," Finch continued, his hand now resting openly on the handle of his gun. "Why don't you call them out here so we can all discuss this like reasonable folks? No need for anyone to get hurt over a simple misunderstanding." Leo felt a bead of sweat gather at the base of his neck. 3 against 1 were not good odds, especially when he wasn't even sure what he was truly fighting for. But looking into Finch's cold, dead eyes, he knew this wasn't about justice. These men would take what they wanted, regardless of who got hurt. "They're not here," he lied, hoping his voice sounded more convincing than it felt. Finch's expression darkened. "Now that's interesting, because my associate over there swears he saw 3 figures in that window not 5 minutes ago." He pointed toward one of the mounted men. "Johnny's got a talent for noticing details others might miss." The man called Johnny tipped his hat mockingly, his rifle resting casually across his saddle. "Maybe you saw shadows, Leo suggested. Old houses play tricks with the light. Maybe, Finch agreed, though his tone suggested he believed. Nothing of the sort. Or maybe you're protecting someone who's caused my employer a considerable financial loss. That kind of loyalty to strangers might make a man wonder about your own involvement. The threat was clear. Finch was suggesting Leo himself was complicit. It was a clever move, giving him a way out by abandoning the cousins or forcing him to face the consequences. Through the window behind him, Leo heard the softest creak of a floorboard. Finch's sharp-eared companion would notice any sound. "Time's running short," Finch said, pulling out a pocket watch. "My patience tends to wear thin when folks aren't being honest." The silence stretched between them, taut and ready to snap. Leo could feel Finch studying his face, searching for cracks. Behind him, the house had gone completely, unnervingly quiet. Either the cousins had found the perfect hiding spot, or they were preparing for something desperate. Knowing what little he did of Isabella, he suspected it was the latter. "You know what I think?" Finch said, closing his pocket watch with a sharp, final click. "I think you bought this place knowing exactly what you'd find here. Maybe the Callahan girls promised you a share of what they stole if you helped. Them stay hidden." "You think wrong," Leo replied. "I bought this vineyard fair and square this morning. It was the first time I've ever set foot on this property." Finch exchanged a quick glance with his men. The man called Johnny shifted in his saddle, his hand moving toward his rifle. "Here's what's going to happen," Finch announced, his voice taking on the tone of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "You're going to step aside, and we're going to search this house. When we find what we're looking for, we'll be on our way. If you resist, you'll be buried on your own property before sunset." Leo's mouth went dry, but he held his ground. "And if I refuse?" Finch's smile returned, colder and more menacing than before. "Then we'll search it anyway, and you won't be around to complain about the mess we make." The front door opened behind Leo with a soft creak. Isabella stepped out onto the porch, her chin raised defiantly despite the fear in her eyes. She had changed into simple riding clothes and had a small pack slung over her shoulder. Sophia and Elena were right behind her. "Enough," she said firmly. "This man has nothing to do with our business, Finch. Let's you and I settle this." Finch's expression shifted to one of pure satisfaction. "There's the sensible approach. Step down here, Miss Callahan, and we can discuss the terms." "The terms are simple," Isabella replied, staying close to Leo's side. "You let him go, and we'll come with you willingly. No violence, no threats, just us for his safety." Leo turned to stare at her. "Isabella, you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." She cut him off softly. "You've already done more than anyone had a right to expect." Finch clapped his hands together once. "See how easy that was? Now, about those documents you took." "What documents?" Isabella asked, her voice steady. "The ones that prove our employer's legitimate claim to your grandfather's." "Mine," Finch said patiently. "The papers your grandfather hid before his unfortunate accident." "My grandfather died in a cave-in caused by your employer's unsafe practices," Sophia shot back, her voice sharp. "And there were no documents to hide." Finch's facade of civility began to crack. "Don't play games with me, girls. We know you have them, and we know they're here. The only question is whether we have to tear this place apart, board by board, to find them." Isabella met his gaze steadily, but Leo could see her hands trembling. Whatever documents they possessed were their only leverage, their only hope, and they were about to lose them. It was then that the sound of more approaching riders echoed across the valley, coming fast from the eastern trail. Finch spun toward the sound, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon. The new riders were still distant, but they were coming hard and fast. "Johnny!" Finch barked. "How many?" The man squinted into the distance. 4 riders, maybe 5. Can't make out who they are from this distance, but they're pushing their horses hard. Finch's jaw tightened. This could be a problem. He turned. Back to Isabella, his patience gone. Change of plans. We're taking you in those documents now, before whoever that is decides to complicate things. The approaching riders were closer now, close enough that their individual horses could be distinguished. Leo could see they were riding in a disciplined formation, not random travelers, but men with a mission. Leo Vance. The shout came. From the lead rider, still 200 yards away, but closing fast. Step away from those people. Finch's eyes widened in recognition, and for the first time, Leo saw a flicker of genuine concern on his face. "Damn it all," he muttered. "Friends." "Of yours?" Isabella asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Sheriff Bennett," Finch replied through gritted teeth. Someone must have sent word. He glanced back at his men, who were looking increasingly nervous. The riders thundered closer, and Leo could now see the glint of a badge on the lead rider's vest. A sheriff and his deputies, riding like they meant business. But Finch's gun was still in his hand, his finger tight on the trigger. "This complicates things," he said, "but it doesn't change what needs to happen." Sheriff Bennett and his men were within shouting distance now, their horses lathered with sweat. The sheriff was a lean, older man with gray whiskers and a no-nonsense face. "Drop your weapons, Finch," Bennett called out as his group fanned out in a semicircle. Nobody needs to die today. Finch, however, was not surrendering. He grabbed Isabella, pulling her in front of him as a shield, the barrel of his pistol pressed against her temple. "Maybe nobody needs to die," he called back. "But that depends on whether you're willing to let justice take its course, Sheriff." "Justice?" Bennett laughed, a harsh sound. "Is that what you call hunting down an innocent woman?" Finch's face darkened. "That woman is a thief. We're here on behalf of a legitimate business to recover what belongs to them." "The Thorne brothers' business interests," Sheriff Bennett corrected, his voice dripping with disgust. "I've seen enough of their version of justice to know what it looks like." The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Finch's men were outnumbered, but they held a hostage. Leo felt sweat trickle down his back as he tried to remain still, watching for an opening. "Here's what's going to happen," Finch announced. "Miss Callahan and I are going to have a private conversation about those documents. Anyone who interferes will watch her pay the price." Sheriff Bennett held up one hand, signaling his deputies to hold their positions. The standoff stretched, everyone waiting for the first move that would determine who lived and who died. "Finch," the sheriff said carefully, "you're making a mistake. The Thorne brothers don't own this territory, and they sure as hell don't own me." "Maybe not," Finch replied, never taking his eyes off Bennett, while keeping the gun pressed to Isabella's head. "But they own enough judges and politicians to make your life very difficult if you interfere." Leo knew he had to do something. He saw the way Finch's eyes kept darting toward the house, toward the promise of the hidden documents. That was his weakness. "Greed. The documents," Leo said, his voice surprisingly calm. "They're hidden under the loose floorboard by the fireplace, wrapped in oiled cloth." Finch's eyes lit up, but he didn't lower his weapon. "Johnny, get in there and find them, and be careful. Miss Callahan is creative when it comes to hiding things." The sharp-eyed rider dismounted and moved toward the porch, but Sheriff Bennett's voice stopped him cold. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Johnny." "And why not, Sheriff?" Finch sneered, his confidence returning. "Because," Bennett called out, a grim satisfaction in his voice, "I've got a warrant right here for your arrest, Finch, on charges of murder, robbery, and conspiracy. Anyone who helps you is an accessory after the fact." Johnny froze on the bottom step, looking back at Finch, his face a mask of uncertainty. "You didn't say nothing about murder charges, Finch." "Shut up and get those papers." Finch snarled, panic creeping into his voice. "The murder of Thomas Callahan," Sheriff Bennett continued, his voice carrying clearly. "Isabella's grandfather. It seems we found a witness who saw you and the Thorne brothers rigging that mine cave-in. A man who's been hiding in fear for 3 years, but who finally decided to come forward." The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Isabella gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Someone saw what happened?" "Old Pete Hardin," Bennett confirmed. "He was working a claim upstream when he saw Finch and 2 other men tampering with the support beams in your grandfather's mine. Says they knew exactly when Thomas would be going down for his afternoon check." Finch's face had gone pale, but his grip on the gun and on Isabella remained steady. "That old drunk's testimony won't hold up in any court." "Maybe. Not on its own," Bennett agreed. "But combined with those documents Miss Callahan has been protecting, the ones that prove her grandfather's legitimate claim to the mine and detail every threat Thorne made, I'd say it's enough to hang all 3 of you." Leo felt the gun barrel tremble slightly. Finch was realizing that killing witnesses wasn't going to solve his problem. Not with a sheriff and 4 deputies watching. "Johnny!" Finch barked again. "I said, get those papers." But Johnny was already backing away, his hands raised in surrender. "Sorry, Finch," he said. "I didn't sign up for a hanging offense. I'm done." The 3rd rider spurred his horse and bolted toward the tree line, deciding retreat was the better part of valor. Finch was suddenly alone, outnumbered, and facing charges that would see him dancing at the end of a rope. His breathing became rapid and shallow. "This isn't over," he whispered. Then louder, "Even if you take me in, the Thorne brothers will never stop hunting her. Those documents are worth too much." "Maybe so," Sheriff Bennett said, slowly dismounting. "But that's tomorrow's problem. Today's problem is you, putting down that gun." Finch's desperation reached its breaking point. With a wild snarl, he shoved Isabella away and swung his gun toward Sheriff Bennett, but the sudden movement threw off his balance. Isabella stumbled, but managed to dive sideways off the porch as the first shot rang out. Bennett's deputies moved with practiced precision. 2 shots answered Finch's wild one, and the outlaw crumpled to the ground, his weapon spinning in the dust. The confrontation was over in seconds, leaving only the echo of gunfire and the sharp smell of powder smoke in the still afternoon air. "Is everyone all right?" Bennett called out, his weapon trained on Finch's motionless form. Leo picked himself up, checking for injuries and finding only bruised ribs. Isabella rushed down from the porch, her face pale but determined. "I'm fine," she said, then looked down at Finch. "Is he?" One of the deputies confirmed it after checking. "For a pulse, he's dead." Caught him square in the chest. Sheriff Bennett holstered his weapon and turned to Isabella with genuine sympathy. "Miss Callahan, I'm sorry it took us so long to get justice for your grandfather. If you're willing to testify and provide those documents, we can finally put the Thorne brothers where they belong." Isabella nodded, wiping tears from her eyes. "I've been waiting 3 years to tell someone who would listen." She glanced at Leo, a look of profound gratitude in her eyes. "The documents are in the house. Everything my grandfather recorded." 2 hours later, after statements had been given and evidence collected, Sheriff Bennett and his men rode away, with Finch's body and a promise to return within the week to escort the cousins to the territorial courthouse. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of deep orange and purple dot Lio, and the 3 cousins stood on the porch, watching the dust settle. The silence between them was comfortable now, no longer filled with secrets and threats. "So," Leo said finally, breaking the quiet, "I suppose you'll be wanting your land back." Isabella turned to look at him, a small, tired smile on her lips. "And where would we go? We've been taking care of this place for 3 years. Seems like a waste to abandon it now. It's my vineyard now," he pointed out, though there was no real challenge in his voice. "True," Sophia agreed, a rare smile on her face. "But you bought it for $1, and it came with 3 very experienced vintners." She gestured toward the rolling, sun-scorched hills beyond the house. "Besides, this place is big enough for 4 people who don't mind a little hard work." Leo considered this, thinking about the long, lonely years he'd spent saving for his own piece of land, dreaming of building something that would last. He'd always imagined doing it alone, but standing here with Isabella, Sophia, and Elena, watching the last light fade over their shared horizon, he realized some things were better built together. "Partners?" he asked, extending his hand. "Partners," Isabella agreed, shaking it firmly. As the first stars appeared overhead, they walked back into the house together, not as a lonely recluse and 3 desperate runaways, but as 4 survivors, ready to start building the life that a $1 vineyard and a chance encounter had made possible. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale where destiny and courage collide in ways you never expected. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything to us.